Hey everybody, this is Mr. Storm. In this video, we're going to start exploring what CSS is and how it works. So, what is CSS? Well, CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheets. And it basically just describes how HTML elements look on the screen. Let's take a look at this example. This web page is developed using CSS. And there are many different styles that we can attach to the same elements on the page. The header element here will be the same. The paragraph elements will be the same. All this stuff up here will be the same. But we can change the style just by adding a different style set or style sheet to it. So let's see style sheet 2. So that's a different style sheet. Style sheet 3, that's a different style sheet that kind of matches the style of the page it's in. Style sheet 4, that's a different style sheet. And then let's look at what it looks like with no style sheet. This looks more like what we've been building, right? Now, again, with just adding some style, we can make it look drastically different. And we're going to learn how to do that this term. Okay. So CSS solved a really big problem for us. HTML was never intended to contain tags for formatting the web page. It was just to describe the content on the page. And it was really hard to actually design pages that looked interesting enough for us to want to use them before CSS came around. Now, CSS also can save us a ton of work because we can create a .css file and store all of our CSS code in that file, and then we can apply that file to any web page we want, and it will apply that same style to that web page. And we're going to explore that in this project today. All right, so let's take a look at how CSS works. So the syntax for CSS is you have a selector and a declaration, right? The selector is basically indicating what element do we want to change. Do we want to change the H1? Do we want to change the paragraph elements? Do we want to change the body? What do we want to change? And then the declaration is how are we going to change it, right? Now, the declaration has two items within it. It has the property and the value. So the property is what are we going to change on that H1? All right, so are we going to change the font style? Are we going to change the color? Are we going to change, what are we going to change about the H1? And then the value is the value of the change itself. So if we're going to change the font color, what color are we going to change it to, right? So that's how CSS works. It's very, very simple, and you'll see how easy it is once we get into it in this project today. So for example, this is the selector. This is going to apply to the paragraph elements on the page. We have two of these declarations here. One is to change the color to red, and the other is to align the text into the center of the page. So let's take a look at what that example looks like. And there it is, right? If we got rid of this CSS and ran it, then this would just be normal looking text. And my face, I just realized, was covering up that. So I'm going to move my face down here. And let's do that again. Sometimes it's hard to remember that my face is big and it blocks stuff. So that's what it looks like, right? And if we got rid of the CSS, then it would just be normal code, or it would be normal stuff on my web page. All right. So CSS can make all kinds of changes to the design of our web pages. So let's talk about some of the selectors we can use. So for example, we can use just a direct selector to directly influence what elements we want to change. If we use a direct selector, like what we're doing in this example right here with the paragraph element, it will change every paragraph element on your page. Every single one of them. They will all change, okay? Make sure you remember that. If you select the element itself, it'll change every element of that type on your page. The other option is we can use an ID. And this ID will only apply to elements which have the same associated ID. We can also use a class, which is what I prefer to use. And this class will only be associated with anything that's associated with that class. So let me show you what that means. So in here, inside our web page, we have a style sheet or we have some style tags, and then we have some CSS code inside the style. Now, we've created a class indicated by the period in the beginning of the name of the class. So we've typed period center. Then we've changed some things about that. Now down here, we're applying that class to both the H1, so we said class equals center, and the paragraph, class equals center. If I got rid of class equals center on the paragraph, notice that that style that we applied goes away, okay? So classes are my preferred way of adding style to a page. All right, let's see. So, we can also add CSS specifically to elements. So for example, like this has two different classes, right? So there's a paragraph.cent or a p.center and a p.large. So what this is going to do is this is going to add this class only to paragraph elements. So this is a paragraph element class. So this is only going to add this .large to paragraph elements. Notice that we've attached the center class to the H1, but it doesn't work, right? It doesn't work because the H1 is not a paragraph element. So we can specify that we only want this class to work for certain elements if we want. That's something that it's a bit more specialized. You might use that or you might not. It's not something I generally use too often. I just indicate things by class, and then I only associate the class to the things I want them to be. But that's something that you can do too. We can also group some stuff together. So for example, notice how the H1, the H2, and the P, the paragraph, all have the same code applied to them. So you want the same changes to all of these. You can actually group them together by just saying H1, comma, H2, comma, P, and then apply that code. All right. Yeah, again, I only use class really. I don't ever mess with ID. You can use the asterisk to select all of the elements on the page if you want as well. I don't really ever use that either. So let's talk about, there are 3 different ways that we can add CSS code to our web page. Each way does good things or bad things depending on what we're trying to do. The first way is external CSS. External CSS means that we use another file called a style sheet. We add the code into the style sheet, and then we apply a link. We create a link in the head element of our HTML page to link to that style sheet specifically, okay? mystyle.css in this case. And then anything inside of mystyle.css will automatically apply to all the elements on that HTML page. That's the cleanest way to add CSS code to your website. And it's the way that we're going to use for pretty much all of our projects. There's another way to do it, however, which is internal CSS. So internal CSS has you creating a style element within the head of your document, and then you write your CSS code inside of that. Now, this is a lot easier to do. Not really easier. It's, it requires fewer steps. But the problem is this style will only apply to the page that you're currently writing it for, right? With an external CSS sheet, you can add a bunch of code and then apply that same sheet to a ton of different web pages just by adding that link. With this is only going to apply to the specific website you're writing it for. And then we have inline CSS. Inline CSS is basically where you create a style attribute and attach it to the specific element you want to change the style of. This we're going to use, throughout the class just to change, like maybe I just want, this one line of text to just be a little bigger, right? Maybe we can add a style attribute to it and then increase the size. We kind of already have done this just by accident when we were changing the sizes of our pictures and stuff like that in the last term. Now you can use multiple style sheets if you want. That's not something I recommend, and I don't ever really do that unless I'm working on unless I'm working on a project that requires it. The cascading order, this is important. So there is an order in which your code will be working. Think about it like this, right? Let's say I had a style sheet attached to my document, and in that style sheet, I have code that will change the paragraph color to red, right? But then in my HTML page, I have a paragraph element, and I want that to actually be blue. Inline styling will overwrite external style sheets, okay? So inline styles will overwrite external and internal style sheets. All right. Okay. Comments. This is something that's really easy to forget if you, if you're just programming for yourself or creating a website for yourself. But it's important that you include comments that explain what your CSS is supposed to be doing. And it's just this /**, then you end it with an **/*. It's pretty easy. Colors. Oh man, colors. So there are so many different colors that we can use. CSS and HTML supports 140 standard color names. So 140 colors that you can just use just by typing their name. Anything from orange to Dodger blue to light gray, medium sea green, right? So these are all colors that are recognizable just by typing their name. And you can see how many colors exist by going to this link here. And there are a ton of colors that you can use to design your web pages. Now, let's say that doesn't work for you. Let's say in those 140 colors, you cannot find the color you want. Well, you can indicate the color by its color value. You can use an RGB color. RGB stands for red, green, and blue. The first number in here is a red value from 0 to 255. The second is the green value, and the third is the blue value. So you can find a color that matches, you can basically, now RGB values, over 6 million different permutations and possibilities. So literally any color that you can think of, you can use with an RGB. You can represent by RGB. Watch this. So if we go to Google and we type in, let's type in, hold on, color picker. Google has this really cool tool that allows you to create and pick colors. You can create a slider here, and let's say I like this really cool blue. It will give you the RGB value down here and the hexadecimal value. And you can use hexadecimal values in web development too. So I don't think they show an example. Oh yeah, right here, hexadecimal value right there. Hexadecimal value is essentially the same as RGB. The first 2 digits are red, the second 2 digits are green, and the third or the last 2 digits are blue. So with the color picker here, you can find really cool really cool colors. Now, one more note about color before we move on, because it's really important. I recommend using the Adobe color wheel. The Adobe color wheel is one of the most powerful tools for determining what you want in terms of color. The Adobe color wheel will allow you to pick colors that look great together. And then you can use those colors as your colors for your web page. It'll essentially allow you to create a swath or a swatch for your colors. Now, this is just the analogous harmony rule. Let's say I wanted a complementary harmony rule. And let's say I wanted to make like a, I don't know, Halloween themed website. That would be cool. I also like, let's see, Triad is cool. That makes some really dynamic looking web pages. Monochromatic is cool. Because like, let's say, just right there, I wanted a blue monochromatic website. Then I can pick this right here. I can have this open while I'm designing my web page. I have all my hex values right there that I can just copy and paste and design my web page in a really, really awesome way. We can also go to, sorry, that's not what I was looking for. We can also do shades, which is kind of a more subtle monochromatic, double split complementary. Like we can get crazy with it, all kinds of crazy permutations. Okay. Alrighty. let's talk about backgrounds really quickly. Some of you are going to want to change the background color or change the background image. You're going to want to change the background of your web page to some image. Now, if you change the color, that's pretty easy. You just apply a background. It's really important you spell background correctly. B-A-C-K-G-R-O-U-N-D. For some people, for some reason, a lot of people want to ignore the G and just call it background because, you know, you kind of miss that G when you pronounce it. And so if you type it, if you spell it background, it's not going to work, right? Make sure you're spelling things correctly. So you just apply the background color to the body and then change the color to whatever you want. And it'll change the background color of your entire project here. Now, in the assignment, let's get over to it. We are going to be changing some information, but we also want to put each section of our web page into a div element. Let's talk a bit about what a div does. A div is essentially just a container in which you can put other elements on your page. And when we get into the assignment, I'm going to explain this a bit more. But you can also change the background color of a div. So for example, let's say I just put this, I'm going to create a div here, div, and I'm going to put this H1 inside of a div. And up here for the style, I want to change the div background color to white. Okay. Now when I run this code, this should put a white box in the middle of my page. There we go, right there. So I've changed the background color of the container that my H1 is inside, but it left everything else unaffected. And we're going to do that in our website today. Okay, that's about enough right now. You can explore these concepts a bit more, play around with it a little bit more, but you know, take the quiz, and then I will see you in the assignment for this week, where we're actually going to apply this stuff we've learned to our website. All right, peace out.